A monk once asked the Buddha, "How do I stop taking the people I love for granted?" The Buddha didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Look at your hand. Really look at it." Why would he say that? About a hand of all things? Because hidden in that simple gesture was the truth about why we only see what we have after it's gone. Today, I'll tell you what the monk discovered and why it quietly changes everything. The evening light at Jetavana was turning amber. Birds were finding their way home. The air was still. No wind, no particular sound. Just the quiet end of an ordinary day. In a corner of the temple grounds, a young monk sat alone, staring at nothing in particular. At his feet, a few flower petals had fallen from the branch above. Just yesterday, those blossoms had been something worth looking at. Now they lay pressed against the earth like scraps of dry paper. Nothing had been lost that day. No one had died. Nothing dramatic had happened. And yet there was a heaviness in the young monk's chest that he couldn't quite name. He had eaten the same rice that morning, walked the same path, bowed at the same hours, but something had shifted, the way a stone shifts beneath your foot on familiar ground. Not enough to fall, just enough to remind you that the ground is not your own. He picked up one of the petals and held it between his fingers, not to examine it, just to hold something. Across the courtyard, an old monk was slowly sweeping, the same sweeping he did every evening, the bristles making the same soft sound against stone. The young monk watched him and thought, he has been losing things for 40 years, and still he sweeps. The monk's name was Upalavana. He had not been ordained long. Before coming to Jetavana, he had lived with his mother. Every morning she prepared his rice porridge. Every evening, she asked if he was feeling well. He heard her voice so often that after a while, he stopped really hearing it at all. That afternoon, during his alms round, he had passed near his mother's home. He saw her at a distance, moving slowly, her back curved in a way he didn't remember, her steps less sure than before. Something caught in his chest like a splinter. Why, when I was right there beside her, did I never really look? Why did I never once say thank you for the porridge she set before me every single morning? There were even moments I found her worrying voice irritating. He had returned to the temple, carrying that weight, and now he sat watching the fallen petals, unable to put it down. Then quietly, the Buddha came and settled beside him. "What are you looking at?" The voice was low, not scolding, not rushing, simply present. Upalavana looked up. After a moment he said, "I was thinking of my mother, and of how when I was right beside her, I couldn't see her at all." The Buddha sat down without a word. "Then why do you think you couldn't see her then?" Upalavana thought for a long time. Slowly he said, "Because it was ordinary, because she was always there, and so I forgot to notice that she was there." The Buddha nodded. He reached down and lifted one of the fallen petals with the tips of his fingers. When a flower is in bloom, what do people say? They say it is beautiful. And after it falls? Upalavana had no answer. He had never said anything about a fallen flower. It had simply never occurred to him. The Buddha continued, "In the Dhammapada, it is written, people do not know the value of what they hold. Only after it is gone do they feel its weight. But by then, it is no longer in their hands." Tears came quietly to Upalavana's eyes. "Then what should I have done?" Before answering, the Buddha asked one quiet question in return. "Is your mother still living?" "Yes." "Then the question is not yet finished." With only those words, the Buddha rose and walked slowly into the amber evening. Upalavana stayed where he was for a long while. He hadn't lost her, he had simply failed to see her. And the reason he hadn't seen her wasn't that his eyes were poor, it was that the belief, "of course she'll always be there," had quietly closed them. This was the thing he understood, for the first time, as the light faded from the sky. The next morning before the alms round, he rose earlier than the others. He walked the familiar road back toward his mother's house, carrying nothing but his bowl. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, she didn't ask why he had come. She simply turned back toward the hearth and began to prepare the porridge. He watched her hands. He noticed how her fingers, swollen at the knuckles now, still moved with the same quiet certainty they always had. He noticed the small sound she made under her breath, not quite a hum, not quite a word, the same sound he realized she had always made, every morning of his childhood, while she stirred. The Dhammapada, which means something like the path of truth, is a collection of the Buddha's words preserved in short, verse-like teachings. One of those verses sits at the heart of today's story. People do not know the value of what they hold. Only when it is gone do they feel its weight. When most of us hear this, we think, right, I need to be more grateful, and then we move on. But if we stop there, we've walked right past what Buddhism is actually pointing at. So let's stay with it a moment longer. Why does gratitude disappear? Is it because we're shallow? Because we're too busy? Because we're ungrateful by nature? Buddhism says none of those. Gratitude disappears because the mind creates a fixed picture of the world, and in that picture certain things are labeled permanent, reliable, guaranteed. Once something gets that label, it becomes invisible, not because it's gone, but because we've decided it isn't going anywhere. In other words, the suffering isn't caused by something being absent. It's caused by the assumption that certain things will never be absent. This is the structure of suffering that Buddhism describes. Waking up in the morning, obviously that will happen. Family being there, of course they will be. A warm meal, naturally. But wait, are any of those actually guaranteed? Waking up means your heart kept beating through the night. Your family being there means they are alive and still choosing to be near you. A meal means someone's hands moved on your behalf. Every single one of those involves a constellation of conditions, any one of which could quietly shift, and yet the mind draws a picture of permanence over all of it. This is where the teaching on impermanence becomes relevant. Everything changes. That is Buddhism's most foundational observation. But the Buddha does not say change itself is the problem. He says wanting things not to change is the problem. When something we believed was permanent turns out to be temporary, we feel the shock of it. We ask, why did this change? But really, it was always changing. It never stopped. We simply didn't see it because we had decided it wouldn't. That gap between what was always true and what we assumed is what makes loss feel so much larger than it needs to. And one more thing I want to gently challenge. Have you ever thought, I'm a bad person because I can't feel grateful? There's a second misunderstanding hiding there. Not being able to feel grateful isn't a character flaw. The problem isn't you. It's the rigid division between a grateful person and an ungrateful person that makes things feel so stuck. Gratitude isn't something you squeeze out through effort. It arrives on its own, in the moment when something you couldn't see suddenly becomes visible. Uppalavana didn't decide to feel grateful when he saw his mother walking at a distance. He didn't try. He simply saw her. That was enough. And maybe that's where practice begins, not in trying harder, but in looking more carefully. A fisherman who has pulled the same nets for 30 years still pauses some mornings, watching the light move across the water, and feels something he cannot name. He hasn't become more grateful. He has simply, for a moment, stopped assuming the sea will always be there. So, how does this show up in the lives most of us are actually living? Think about your workplace for a moment. You arrive in the morning. There's coffee already made. Your desk is clear. The printer has paper. The Wi-Fi works. How many of those things did you notice today? Usually, none of them. They're just there. That's what there means, right? But then one day, the person who always made the coffee calls him sick. The printer runs out of toner. Suddenly you find yourself thinking, oh, someone was doing that. Someone kept doing that every single day. This isn't a story about shallow gratitude. It's a story about a label, the permanent and automatic label that the mind quietly places over things it has decided are guaranteed. The moment you notice, that's when gratitude arrives. Noticing comes first. Gratitude follows. Now think about someone you live with. After years of sharing a home with someone, their presence can start to feel like background noise. Their voice doesn't register the way it once did. You stop really noticing them. Some people call this love fading. But from a Buddhist view, love hasn't necessarily faded at all. What's happened is that the belief, this person will always be here, has made the person themselves harder to see. Here's something worth sitting with. You may think of your family as something you have, but perhaps that's not quite right. A long chain of small chances brought that person into your life, and every single day, they are making a quiet choice to still be near you. That choice doesn't stop. It keeps being made. Your family isn't something you possess. There's someone who is here today. Again, That shift in framing, small as it sounds, can change the color of an ordinary Tuesday. And then there's the body. When everything works, we don't think about the body at all. No pain, no heaviness, moving without effort. That's just normal, right? But then comes a sprained ankle, or 3 days of fever, and suddenly, oh, this is what I had. The same structure again. Gratitude didn't appear because health disappeared. It appeared because the permanent label fell away, and what had been there all along finally came into view. What the Dhammapada is reaching toward isn't, feel guilty for not noticing sooner. It's something quieter than that. What if you could notice just a little, before the losing, not as punishment for the past, just as a possibility starting now, even once a week, even on an ordinary Wednesday. You wake up, your legs carry you to the kitchen, and for just a moment you let that register, not as a miracle, not with drama, but simply as something real that is happening right now, and might not always. That's the whole practice really, not a grand transformation, just a small loosening of the permanent label, repeated quietly, over time. And maybe that's what the great teachers were pointing to when they sat under trees, or walked slowly between villages, or paused before eating a simple meal. Not performing gratitude, but just stopping the automation for a breath or two. A monk once said that he spent his first 10 years in the monastery learning to drink his tea. Not meditation, not scripture, just tea, actually tasted, actually warm, actually there. He meant the cup was always full, I just kept missing it. If there's one thing you might try, just one, here it is. Tonight, before you fall asleep, think of 3 things that were still there today. Not special things, not achievements or moments of joy, just things that didn't disappear. You don't need a journal. You don't need to write anything down, just lie in the quiet and let them come. Today, I woke up. Today I heard someone's voice. Today something warm reached my hands. That's all. The reason to look for ordinary things rather than highlights is exactly this. Gratitude goes dark most reliably around the things that seem like they'll never change. Not the dramatic moments, the quiet, unremarkable ones. Behind this practice is something the Buddha encouraged his students to cultivate, what's sometimes called right mindfulness, a quality of simply noticing what is present, right now. Not in a special place, not in a particular posture, just a willingness to see what's actually here. It isn't complicated. It doesn't require anything. I won't promise that doing this will flood your heart with gratitude every morning. The next day will still look ordinary. There will be days when nothing seems different. But every so often, in a quiet moment you didn't plan for, something you'd stopped seeing might become briefly, gently visible again. It's a small change, unhurried, nothing dramatic, but sometimes a very slight shift in how you see is enough to make the same life feel, just slightly, like something worth noticing. I think the only real way to know what I mean is to try it once. Just once, tonight, before sleep takes you. The cup you set down without thinking, the door that opened when you turned the handle, the breath that came without being asked. These things were never nothing. They only looked that way because they kept showing up. Here's a question I'll leave with you. No rush to answer it. Of everything you currently think of as just ordinary, just the way things are, if one of those things quietly disappeared tomorrow, which would you notice first? You don't have to answer now. You don't even have to answer at all. Just let it rest somewhere in your chest for a while. The way morning light falls across a particular corner of your kitchen. The sound of a neighbor you've never spoken to, leaving for work at the same time each day. A smell in your own home that you stopped noticing years ago, but that someone visiting might stop and say, "What is that? It's lovely." These are not small things dressed up to seem important. They are the actual texture of a life, the warp and weft of it, and most of us will only see them clearly once, briefly, on the day they are gone. A monk I once heard of kept a single cracked bowl for 40 years. When it finally broke beyond use, he sat with the pieces for a long time, not grieving exactly, just finally meeting something he had held every day without ever truly seeing. When gratitude feels out of reach, it often begins with our inability to accept what is, and we explored that root in an earlier teaching on embracing things as they are. Upalavana hadn't lost his mother. He had simply seen her from far away, her back curved, her steps uncertain, and something in him opened. Nothing extraordinary had happened. She had always been there, but always being there had made her, for a long time, invisible. Gratitude isn't something you manufacture. It isn't a discipline. It isn't something the diligent feel and the rest of us fail at. It's what arrives, quietly, when you see something you hadn't been seeing. The Dhammapada was not written for the moment after loss. It was written for right now. Today, someone is still there. Today, something is still continuing. Today, you are still here. How much that means, you don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to perform it. Just once, for a moment, let yourself be still enough to see it. Thank you so much for spending this time here today. That time for Upalavana was just a Tuesday afternoon. Nothing marked on any calendar, no occasion, no reason to pause. And yet something in that ordinary light, falling across his mother's shoulders, became the whole teaching. Not because he searched for it, but because for one unguarded moment, he forgot to look away. Perhaps that is all awakening ever is. Not arrival at something new, but a failure, brief and merciful, to maintain the distance we have always kept. Pause. Whose face came to mind while you were listening today? One story a day. In a week, your words will change. In a month, your eyes will change. In a year, the same world will look completely different.